Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Warner. I lead product marketing here at Privado.ai. I'm here with,
They're still dropping in real one sec. Sorry. I'm just looking at the attendees. They're just slowly filing in still. So
yeah, I know. Just introducing myself. Yeah, we'll wait for everyone to still log into the webinar, but we're excited to have you here today.
just like Ben said, guys, we're just waiting for people to funnel in. We'll do introductions in just a sec. Thanks for jumping on with us. Hey,
Yeah,
Charles.
it looks like we've got a lot of people here in the webinar. Like I was just saying, with my people logging in. So, yeah, we're here today to talk about our web auditor product and give a live demo, answer any questions. So, yeah, it's gonna take up most of the hour, but we want to have people ask questions throughout the session. We'll get started here in just a minute or two. Okay, I think we're ready to go, Patrick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's leveling out a little bit on people joining, so I think we're at a good point. Thanks, Ben.
Cool. So yeah, I'm Ben Warner again. Yeah, lead product marketing here at Privado.ai. I'm here with Patrick Murphy. I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Patrick Murphy. I lead customer success for the Americas here at Privado. And if you are currently one of our clients, you've been working with me and my team for some time. If you're looking into potentially partnering with Privado, you'll be working in tandem with me as we start on our privacy journey together. But yeah, Ben, pass back over to you.
Sure. So this is part three of our website privacy webinar series. So yeah, hopefully some of you have joined some of the other ones. So our part one was focused on all the legal developments, enforcement trends we're seeing with website privacy. There's been a lot of increased enforcement in that area that we've seen. And so we had a lawyer from Wilmer and Hale, Ali Jasani, present on that. And then part two, we had Dan Harms, partner at Fuller Consulting, give it a warmer workshop on how to build a website privacy governance program, looking at what are all the things you should be checking for on your website and how to prevent these types of risks going forward. So we'll have both of these recordings if you missed those in the follow-up from today's webinar. Also, we'll share the recording from this webinar and share the slides we're presenting here. So we're just going to go through a little bit of an introduction before we jump into the demo. During the demo, please do ask any questions. There's a Q&A button you should have to ask questions. We'll be looking at those throughout the demo. And then any other questions that we haven't answered, we'll answer those at the end. We'll also be checking the chat. So yeah, we'd like to make this as interactive as possible. All right, let's kick it off. So we just did intros. I'll skip this one. Went over the agenda for today. So yeah, first want to just highlight why this is a big focus for us and why we've done 3 webinars on website privacy. There's been a lot of increased diligence by several different regulators. So this year was the first year we had actions from the new California Enforcement Agency, the CPPA. They issued fines against Honda and Todd Snyder for their websites that were not in compliance with CCPA. And so now they're, doing a lot more investigations in addition to the Attorney General of California, who's also delivered some violations in the past. And so, on top of the other states that have increased enforcement and passed new laws, there's just a lot more diligence on websites, particularly with Texas, state of Washington, Maryland's new privacy law coming up. And then in terms of the most Maybe some companies here have dealt with this. Most volume of privacy legal issues has come from CIPA, so the California Invasion of Privacy Act. Yeah, so it's an older statute, but it allows for private right to action. And there's been at least 1,700 lawsuits filed in the past 3 years, many more that were settled outside of court, and many more that were just delivered, via demand letters. So there's many websites have been put under scrutiny with the news with these new wave of CIPA lawsuits. And then in the UK, so there's similar issues in Europe with GDPR. The ICO regulator in the UK has launched a campaign to review the top 1,000 websites in the UK to make sure that they're in compliance with all of the latest laws there. And there's also a new law that the UK is passing this summer that is going to increase enforcement as well. Okay, so why did we build WebOtter? What is the issue with websites? So consent management platforms in general, they were designed and are designed to collect consent, to enforce consent rules in terms of, okay, if someone's opting out, you know they shouldn't have cookies being dropped for third-party advertisers, for example. But these tools have not been built to audit and ensure that websites are actually in compliant. And many times they are set up once or twice, but the websites are consistently changing. Marketing teams are adding new third parties on a regular basis. Third parties themselves are changing the way data is flowing. And so from a study that we did last year looking at the top 100 websites in Europe and the United States, about 3/4 were not in compliant. And in the US, there were about 3 times as many risks. And we defined a risk as, any cookie that is firing or dropping that should not be dropping, or a third-party advertising cookie in the US, or anytime there's a network request, data sharing incident where that should not be happening because users have opted out. In the UK, or sorry, in Europe, there are opt-in consent requirements. So similar thing with the less volume. Most websites are not in compliant, and there needs to be an additional regular auditing of these websites to ensure that they maintain compliance. So web auditors designed to do exactly that, to provide that visibility across teams to see, what is on the website, what third parties are receiving data, which third parties are receiving data that shouldn't be when users opt out or do not provide proper consent. And then additionally looking at what banners look like, ensuring that they are displaying properly, that links are displaying properly, that CMPs are set up correctly. So we'll go through that today. And to check your website, you can request a free audit through Web Auditor, and we can go over those results over email, over a call. The results are strictly for your company, and they're deleted afterwards. And so there's no risk there. Now I'll pass it over to Patrick. So he's much more familiar with what are the most common pitfalls that companies are dealing with their websites.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, for teeing it up. And so I'm working with a plethora of different organizations in different industries and different points in their privacy journey. And so these are some very common pitfalls that we see where teams come to us and they're trying to solve and get a better understanding of these items. And through scanning websites through whatever regional jurisdiction you're focused on, we're able to audit the work that you're doing so that you have a clear understanding of, hey, we just spent all this time investing in our CMP, putting work in there, investing in GPC signals and our tag manager so that those are working as we want to. Is the work that we've put forth working as we intended? And then additionally, for teams that aren't in control of their websites, it's a good way to have a kind of check to make sure that the teams that you're contracted to are doing what they said they're doing. And you can ensure that if you have new feature functionality being released or a new website going out, that you can ensure that your consenting pathing and mechanisms are working as you intended. And so with that, really scanning on a regular basis has helped teams get that change understanding. And we'll show you guys through the demo of all the different ways that we can gain insights as to what's happening on our websites. Now I'm going to share screen real quick. All right, let me know if you guys can see this okay.
Looks good.
Perfect. Awesome. So how Ben was kind of understanding it is, we have GDPR in Europe, we have CPRA in the US as the main two kind of gold standards, if you will. In privacy, online consent, there's kind of two pathings. GDPR is opt-in. US is opt-out. So what that means is when a user goes to the website, nothing is fired in the EU until the user consents that they want various trackers, advertising, etc., to be fired. US stateside and other regions, more capitalistic, collecting information until the user decides to opt out. So that's how Privado bases our test on these two low-hanging fruit frameworks, and we tie the various regional jurisdictions to those frameworks. So you can see on the screen, we have opt-in compliance up top, opt-out compliance below. We could see that we've scanned against France and the UK for this example. This website that we've scanned is just our dummy website that we use to test and validate various pieces and also do various checks on our end. And so we've postured it so that there are various errors for example's sake. And so within here, we do a check from a geo region of France and a geo region of UK. Below, we've checked on California. And so the reason why we picked on two for opt-in compliance is we've noticed ever since Brexit, we see a little differentiation between the mainland and UK. So we advise teams scan in that kind of manner. The reason why we're only scanning France is because most CMPs are set up on a blanket statement. So if we're okay in France, the blanket should be working across the board. We also have various other regions that you can scan, specifically if you have websites that are designated specifically for a country, like having a .fr or .de for France or Germany, then we can target directly for those geos. But this gives you a good understanding if compliance is being honored in the region and with that kind of opt-in stance. So in here, we can see first and foremost, we're checking, do we have a banner? We can't do a check if we don't have a banner. So we have that going. So I'll pick on France here. We'll even give a nice little screenshot of the website in question so you can see everything that's going on there. Then if there is a banner, we can move forward. And the first check is a no action. So we've loaded the website. We haven't done anything. It just loaded. Is anything firing that shouldn't until a user has consented? We can check on those. And then we also do a reject all. So after the user has denied their consent, are we still firing things that we shouldn't be? And so I'll pick on network request for France. So in here, there's two types of checks. We have cookies, and then we have network calls. Network calls are API calls that can also trigger cookies. So in here, we can see we have two vendors, TikTok ads and Clarity, firing when a user has rejected consent from France. And so if I click in here, it gives us a nice understanding of what we scanned, what's going on, geography, applicable laws, and then we give you an understanding of what this policy is doing. So policies are our guardrails in Privado, and there are ways that we can get alerts on various privacy risk. And so this one's ensuring that our CMP is working after a user rejects all cookies, and here's some guidance that you should take to make sure that you're honoring consent. So we have a couple get calls, a couple post calls. Within here, we give you the call stack so you can see how that's running, the various calls that it's making, and then from that, the initiator chain in which the call order is occurring. So a lot of the times, like in this example, we can see that TikTok's getting called because Google Tag Manager is invoking it. And this is probably because we have Google Tag Manager set as strictly necessary or as an essential vendor. And then we had the marketing team or someone accidentally tie TikTok to that. So then it's getting triggered when a user has rejected consent. We can also check our CMP to see how we've configured Google Tag Manager and make sure that that's orientated as we need. And then within here, we have a plethora of these calls. And so we've also isolated the script in question that's making those network calls. And so if we address the script, we get rid of all of these potential issues. And then in here, we'll do a check on what CMP you're using. So for this example, it's OneTrust. We have the check of what the simulation is going, and then we'll also give you the HAR file to download as well. So you can see we launch the browser, identify the CMP, and then run through a simulation there. And so as teams are going, if this is a risk to your organization, you can start and you can even send that to Jira, create a ticket for the team to look into it. As you're running through the process, you can mark status. And then if the team I say, hey, Ben runs our website. We found this TikTok ad. Can we go address this? Once Ben fixes it, we can trigger a rescan and the status will automatically change to fixed if it's fixed, or it'll stay open if it's not. And then you can address as needed. So there's some cool automation in here. And then
Gotcha.
below,
Sorry, just to interrupt. We just got a question. Do you have to have the reject all button as well on the banner?
not giving legalese, but
Right.
definitely would say reach out to your legal counsel. For EU, yes, you would need the banner. For the US, that's up for interpretation from my perspective. But again, not giving legal counsel, definitely correlate with your legal representative for your org on those. Great question, though. From my perspective, yes, for EU. And then over here, jumping ahead to opt out. So this is the other kind of stance that various regions will take, the US being the main one. And what we're doing here is we're checking against GPC signals. So those are global privacy controls that a user can set in their browser, like Chrome or Safari, Firefox, etc. That's a binary call that would say, hey, yes, I do consent, or no, I don't consent. And then it's up for organizations to ensure that they can receive that signal and then honor that request with their tags or CMP, what have you. Sometimes it's a combination of both. In the US, a lot of teams do not have a banner. It's not necessarily a requirement. Again, not giving legal advice, but if you do have a banner in the US, we can toggle on the opt-out check. And that's doing something similar to what we're doing with the EU opt-in check is, hey, once that user does click that opt-out button, are we firing any cookies? Are we firing any network calls? And we give you the same kind of understanding as we were doing before so that you can go in and take remediation where needed. Usually we see that there's a negative actor and it's occurring across the board. So sometimes if you fix like Google Tag Manager, for example, you'll fix a plethora of issues on your website, which is great. So now I'll move back.
Really quick, we got a couple more questions that came in or comments. There was a question about what CMPs we can detect. So this solution, and we'll go into a little more into how it works, but it's agnostic to the CMP that's being used. So it's running a scan on the website itself and then detecting issues with any CMP. And then, just like any third party, if it's TikTok, the CMP is also detected from the scan. And so, yeah, it's compatible with any CMP. And then this was, more of, I guess, a little bit less of a question, but yeah, and just it's a point about the banner in Europe. In general, there's been more scrutiny about how the banner looks, and there shouldn't be deceptive patterns. So someone mentioned that the cookies choices should be the same size and same intensity. And we actually do have checks for that. Patrick, if you want to just run through that.
Yeah, I can get to that. We'll get to that a little bit further too.
Okay.
So we have additional secondary and tertiary checks outside of just general, is our consent mechanism working? These overlap a little bit with the legalese, a little bit with privacy, a little bit other functions too. But like you were saying, we have that dark pattern or deceitful pattern prevention. And so what this is checking on is exactly that. Do we have the reject button? And again, like I was saying, California, not really applicable, but teams can have it. We'll check it in France. We'll check it in whatever regions you need there. And then we also pick up on button color contrast, like you were saying. So in here, we can see clearly we have a reject all button. We have a confirm choices, allow in there. And they're all the same color as well, which is why it passed this check. We don't have one that's the company color and then one that's grayed out or muted, making it more attractive to click on one button than the other. Green, 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 everything's green. So great, great tee up for that. We'll get into a few other examples like that after I get through kind of how do we start the scan and then also the source of truth that we get through Privado scans as well. So we're doing tests and we're able to get the audit pieces, and then we're also just able to see what's on the website in and of itself. So if I go back in here, we can see the website that I scanned. We had our privacydarkpatterns.com, which is our dummy site. It's as simple as coming in, adding a URL that you want to scan against, naming it however you'd like, and then picking whatever geos. So if I was operating in the US and the EU, this would be my set as a privacy analyst or a web dev trying to audit what work I've done. And you could set these to whatever you want. If there's additional regions you need, once you move over to partnership with us, we'll just build those out and apply them to whatever jurisdiction policy we need to. Within here, we can set individual scan cadence as well for one-off websites, which is great. And then if we have any like data domes or security blockers in place for proxy or what have you, we can work to, allow list a certain IP or get through like a data dome with advanced configurations, which is great. And so with this too, we have additional bulk settings. So I set my default geos to what I knew I was going to scan against. If you know you're only going to scan against California, just set it as California and I never have to click through that. We have the global scheduler. So if we don't want to one off every single website and we just want a summary report to rescan every week, which is what most of my teams do, you can set it to weekly and whatever time cadence you want. Most of my teams will set that on like Sunday night so that they have fresh on Monday. And we also send out a summary email that you can toggle on to various of the role-based access controls. So they get a summarization of all of the results for all of the websites that you've ran. So just some cool functionality that we have added. We'll keep building that as we go. And then bulk scanner. So if you have a list of websites and you know you're going to scan it against California or what have you, you can just copy paste that column or have it separated by a comma, and you can just run all those at once and not have to enter them one at a time. And then with that initial call outs here, you get the issues, third parties, cookies, etc. And we'll be working on some additional advancements for organization here. And then,
A quick question we just
yeah,
got. There was a question about can web auditors scan authenticated sites, meaning pages after logging in?
yeah. So that's what would be worked out in the contracting if you had a user or custom journey, say a logged in experience or kind of a checkout flow that you would want us to test, we could enable that flow as well for you guys. That's a great question. Been any others before I get into third parties?
No, that's it at the moment.
Thank you guys also for asking questions. I hate when I just talk at myself. So thanks for being engaged. In here, again, third party and over, this is what I consider our source of truth. So if we want a clear understanding of what's going on the website, regardless of what's going on with user consenting, we have that and we can have a clear understanding. The reason why we have the policies and tests is so that we don't get lost in this table sauce and not really know where to focus. We do the audit over in the tests, and this is again just for additional knowledge. In here, we can see all of the various vendors that are running, and we can see kind of different what categorization this vendor falls into. So Google Tag Manager is a marketer. Hosting location, you could see a little flag. That's when we know that Google's hosted in the US. And if we're scanning against the UK, we're calling that out as a potential EEA cross-border transfer, just so that you're aware of which vendors might be engaged in that. And then within here, we can pick on, I'll just keep picking on TikTok, why not? You can see posting locations in multiple regions. TikTok is firing during the user's journey, so consenting actions. It's highlighting at what point in the user's experience on the website is something engaging or firing. So it's a quick way to see, oh, okay, so Core is only firing after the user accepts, and it's also firing after a user accepted and then withdrew. This might be an area that we need to look into, but we'll have that also called out here in our tests and issues so we don't have to dig through all this. It's just a good, easy way to be able to sort and understand what's going on. In here, TikTok Ad Manager, we get a nice little summary. If they are receiving specific data elements, we'll call that out for you. If we're seeing that they're in play and sending signals but not potentially data elements, we'll also show those items. So you could see there's a few that aren't collecting specific data elements but are still functioning and detected. But again, just good insights in there. And then we have this for whatever flavor you want to kind of understand. Do you want to see it from a third-party perspective, a data element perspective, scripts, cookies, or storage? And so I'll go through these all briefly for you. So data elements is kind of cool. It alludes to sensitivity as well. And we can also customize sensitivity for each org. So if for you guys, maybe email is less of a quotient, we can knock that down to low. or maybe advertising identifier is a high for you. We can knock that to high just so you can get an understanding of potential risk and where that's going on the little snapshot, but you'll have this information regardless. So you could see just from this perspective, instead of a third party perspective, what data elements are flowing to where. We get this nice reject and consent again, related cookies if they're capturing them. And then you can see all of the data flows again. Unique identifier is almost always collected. That's why we have so many data flows for it. This might be a little bit crazy for you guys on here. So you can see all of the different third parties that are collecting unique identifier and all of the variables and values associated with each. And then we get the little flag going on as well for the cross-border callouts too. So again, this is the source of truth. The audit happens in the test. And this is just really so you can do additional investigation if you're curious about various pieces. So you can see even in here, we have the scripts tied to the vendor, calling out the type, what category the vendor is, when the script is specifically firing. So this one's just going rogue on us, where this one's only firing after a user accepts. This one's only firing after a user withdraws consent, etc. Domain, if there's any fingerprinting or browser permissions collecting, and then when we first saw that. As we do rescans, this is kind of helpful to see when new things come about. We also have date range discovery. So if you want to just see what was happening that was new in the last recency, you can just filter quickly. Pause for a sec. Any questions?
Yeah, none right now we want to get into. We'll talk about more some of the different checks and tests later on.
Yes. Cookies is really interesting from my perspective, because a lot of times when you find a cookie, you're like, okay, how did this get here? We'll call out the source so you can backtrack and be able to understand exactly how these things are getting fired or placed. And then data element call out if it's going on right here in category. This is if you're using OneTrust. OneTrust, we support being able to call out which cookie is categorized to which category in your CMP. The reason for this, for support for OneTrust, is OneTrust displays this in the browser or in the banner browser. And also when you do an inspect on the page, it's all orchestrated. So what we're picking up on for teams that do use OneTrust is we're able to see, hey, you have these cookies categorized, you have these not categorized, categorize them. So it helps teams audit their CMP even further, even though teams have CMPs that can scan and audit themselves. That's like having an organization regulate themselves. So having an outside perspective is always helpful, and it really helps teams make sure that they are compliant, even when their CMP is saying that they are and they aren't. So in here, some good insights. We'll also give lifespan and security. So secure is if it's HTTPS loaded, lifespan, pretty straightforward there. How long is this cookie in play until a user has to re-interact? So we have some in session, we have some 390 days. And with our call out, we'll also call out against the EU if you scan against that region. Hey, this cookie is supposed to be 13 months. 13 months is 395 days. So technically this IDE cookie from Google Ad Manager is out of compliance from an EU perspective. So we'll have those call outs and issues as well, which I'll show in a sec. We get the value again created at, and prevalence. Prevalence is super helpful for teams, especially teams that use Trade Desk or any kind of ad serve sort of mechanism where it targets, maybe day over day, week over week, audience over audience, different folks. And so you could see if that's coming and going more regularly. So you can make sure that you're setting your CMP and your GPC signals to include those third parties that you don't necessarily have a contract with, but your ad serve is serving onto your website. And then
All right.
lastly, oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
oh yeah, we still have some questions that just came in. So there was a couple questions around categorization. So yeah, this is a key part of managing and auditing a website, both from a cookie perspective and a third party perspective. So the question was about how the categorization is done and can it be customized?
Yeah, so we have two categorizations. One's just like what the vendor would be associated with, like TikTok as an advertiser or something of that. And then we have it what your company has described or designated in the CMP. Setting both are you can change. So within Privado, you can go to inventory, third parties, and update to a different category. And then separately of that, just for the internal UI piece, in your CMP, the privacy team and hopefully the web dev marketing teams have some understanding of how the CMP works. And you basically assign cookies and scripts and what have you, different vendors to different categories. So as you see on the banner, if you toggle off functional, when a user does that, anything that's tied to functional will also get shut down. It's a good question. Any
Thank
others?
you. Yeah, there was one about a script URL pattern. Um, yeah, I don't know exactly if there's like a particular pattern that um, means something different that you look at or anything like that.
For Google consent mode, we have a check on that. So there are different patterns in there where you have to use certain variable quotients that would inform Google consent that, hey, this user denied consent. That's kind of what we pick up on. Otherwise, it's just your standard scripts that are on the websites. Yeah, if there's any follow-up to that, definitely throw it in the chat. Yeah, over here on storage, a lot of teams were just curious on what was getting stored where. So we're calling out local and session storage for you guys here over on the storage piece. But again, third party through storage, this is just your source of truth for what's on the website. Where all the fun happens, if you will, is in the tests and issues page where we're just displaying exactly, the areas of concern that you guys can look into. And so with that, going into the more secondary, tertiary checks that we do here at Privado, these were all added based on client need. So we have a really big feedback loop here at Privado. Say a good chunk of my time is spent in that iteration and speaking with teams on how we can make things better, how we can make it more useful. And so if you engage with us, that'll be a common discussion. And we'll always ping you on as we're doing our roadmaps to make sure that we align with your needs as well. But in here, we already covered the deceitful dark patterns that we're checking on, making sure that we're not misleading folks to click something rather than the other option. In here, we also have website regulatory link presence. So this is what I was meaning by overlapping with legal, maybe not necessarily always privacy oriented. And these can be toggled on or off. So with our policies, whatever flavor you want, if you don't need to check on these, we can toggle off different pieces and even granular pieces. So if you know that you are not going to be scanning your job board for applicants, you can toggle off the applicant privacy notice link and we don't get a check on that. But in here, it's just calling out, hey, do we have these various links that are required by various regional jurisdictions? Modern Slavery Act being one unique to the United Kingdom. It's not applicable anywhere else, but if you're operating in the UK, just make sure you have it if it's required by your legal team. And so all of this, again, might be decided yes or no by legal, and we can toggle off these granular, but it's just a good insight to see, hey, do we have these present so we don't get dinged? In here, Google consent mode, this is what I was picking up on around calling out kind of script-esque orientation stuff. So in here, doing the various checks again. So we're doing no action, reject all for the EU, GPC, and opt out for the US. We can see that there was good in the California region and the UK region, but in France, we didn't configure our Google consent mode verification appropriately. So within here, we have the various flags. So Google Ads is going, Google Analytics. If we click in, we're checking to see, do we have, excuse me, do we have the GCS, the GCD, and the NPA variables addressed appropriately? And we're giving you that insight here. So in here, the parameter GCD is valid if all consent values for the ad storage are indicated with a P, Q, or M. These are variables that Google has decided reflect a user's denial and consenting options. So we need to ensure that if a user rejects, that the right values are being passed so that Google isn't targeting ads at them. And so this is that check that we're making sure that the variable where the X's are either P, Q, or M for this regard. For the US, it'll be P, Q, M, and U because we get opted in before we opt out. So it's a different variable for the US. Cookie compliance, this is my favorite one that most of my teams enjoy, it's the audit against the OneTrust and the expiration. So we're able to see the cookie expiration. And if anything's above that 395 day, we'll get that call out. I think this was actually the example I found when we were looking at the cookie page. Yep. So you can see 400 days should be 395. And so that's just an easy send that over to our dev team, adjust that expiration, and we'll be good to go on both these call outs here. Down here on uncategorized, it's again calling out, we were able to read from the user perspective, not what's in your settings in OneTrust, but what the user sees based on their experience is something uncategorized that's firing, especially if it's in regard to an advertiser. And so within here, we can see that within here, we had doubleclick.net was firing this EID cookie. This EID cookie was not assigned to strictly necessary functional analytics or marketing or whatever flavors you have, and that you need to go into your CMP and make sure that it's categorized appropriately. So it's a good audit check for your own CMP vendors. And like I said, we have a few other checks we didn't have active here just for time and discussion's sake. But if there were any other kind of privacy oriented checks that your team was doing manually that you wanted to see if we could provide a policy that could do that check automatically, that would be a conversation that we would definitely want to have with you, as we're always iterating and building so teams get more value out of the tool. Yeah, open it up for questions unless Ben, you have anything else you wanted to chime in first.
No, that's been great. Yeah, thanks for going through all of that. Yeah, we do have several questions that I wanted to run through. Yeah, one was from a little bit earlier asking about if we detect activities that would be targeted in California with the wiretapping laws. So we were talking about CIPA earlier. So there's a number of different reasons that those the demand letters are sent out, and so any of these checks that theoretically could result in a CIPA lawsuit for rejecting cookies or sharing data with certain third-party advertisers, for example. In addition, a lot of the lawsuits have focused on the tools that are listening or recording user activity. So we have a separate check that we didn't show here that that just checks whether you have one of those tools integrated with the website at all, because they typically, like a full story or Hotjar, they're recording user activity, and even if a user doesn't opt out, that could result in a CIPA demand letter.
Yeah, and so with that too, we have, like Ben was saying, a policy check. We'll pick up on if things are violating, like even in the US, if things are violating when a user does opt out, but some teams want to just know, hey, do I have this going? Maybe they don't actively operate or manage the website. Maybe they're not always involved in it and they want to just ensure that, hey, do we even have those things? We have a policy that just gives that visibility. Hey, you do have, Hotjar running on this website. It's not necessarily a compliance audit check on the consenting pathing, but it's just an understanding of, hey, it's there. We have a similar checks for Google Analytics signals and enhancement feature, which is like a piggyback Google Analytics 4 piece. And that's also another check where it's not against, hey, the user denied consent and it's firing. It's hey, it's active on the website. If you need to turn it off because you guys don't want it on, you can now do so, kind of idea. It's a great question.
Thank you for adding to that. So a few other questions that came in. We had one around the different types of data elements that we can pick up here. So do
Yeah,
you have the idea? Yeah, can you just
Yeah, we pick up
on that?
on any data elements, so we're able to detect and add, and that's part of what our AI does, is it's able to understand context, heuristics, ingress, egress, what else is going on with the various data that's being surfaced. And if we have one that's not just default as part of our data element orientation, we'll actually have a little orange dot that'll pop up and it'll be, hey, this is a new data element. Do you want to merge this with an existing one? Maybe it's kind of like similar to one that we already have detected, or if it's a net new one that we don't have. I'll just pick on one example was like sex positions for one of our organizations, and we had to make sure that that was picked up, and then it was associated with whatever was going on. We didn't tie that to another like data element, so now they have that as a data element for their team. So if there's any uniquenesses that are not just like standard across the board for all industries, those things do get picked up as well. And we even allow you to kind of articulate how you want to use it moving forward. It's a great question. So we use a regex layer just for clarity. So regular expression, how folks normally code. And then AI comes in for all of the uniquenesses to kick out any false positives and surface any false negatives, just for
Thank
example.
you. We had another question about visualization or overview for the detected cross-border data flows. So I
So
think if you do with third parties, you can see
yes.
flagged. We might have talked about that earlier.
Yeah, so within here in third parties, it's again just calling out if this various vendor is located in a location that is not what you're scanning against. So in this one, we did scan against California, but we also scanned against the UK and France. So it's flagging this one for those teams to make sure that they're aware that this would be considered a potential cross-border transfer.
Thank you. We had another one. If the action is withdrawal, nothing should be firing. Yeah, I mean, there's reasons, if it's an essential third party, those could still be firing. And depending on your privacy policies and the location as well. Right.
Privacy policy, location, legal ROI decisions on risk. There's a plethora of things. Again, this is just a sample environment website. It's not a real environment. So that's why we have all of these things kind of getting flagged on purpose. It's just so that we can use it for demo. Yes, you are completely right. We shouldn't be seeing Google Analytics firing at all of this. If this was a real website and I was the privacy analyst for it, I'd be having a massive panic attack and we'd be doing a bunch of addressing. But that's really where the issues and all of that really come into play, is so that we don't have to look here. We can just bring our attention over to whatever's called out on the risk side of the house. But yes, you are correct. Withdrawal, opt out, reject. These are all scary quotients for items that shouldn't be firing. But things like this for cookie law, where we know that's part of OneTrust and part of the CMP, we would expect some of those things to be firing during all of the different flows. So it's kind of whatever flavor's going on there. It's a great question, or great insight. But yeah,
Another question just came in. What team typically is responsible for the routine use of your tool,
ooh,
IT compliance audit? So,
love that question. Depends on your organization. Really, normally where we start is privacy has an initiative where they have to ensure that the website is working as intended. We usually start with that team. But in all of my conversations, we've always had some remediation to be had. And so we need to involve whoever owns either the website or the CMP, if that's not the same teams, and bring those together. So Privado does really focus on bridging the gap between the teams so that privacy can start talking to the web teams that actually own the code and the marketing that's on the website. So we see it kind of progress in a crawl, walk, run kind of scenario. Crawl in the beginning, privacy teams engaging with me. We're running through this kind of engagement together and collaborating. In some regard, other teams just run on their own. And then if there is an issue like the TikTok that we were picking on earlier, that's kind of when the conversation happens, where it'll start with this. We're on a video call together. I'm just going to click through and talk about it. We'll start fixing. Then it'll progress to, hey, Patrick, we had this conversation 6 times already. Can you just send this over to our Jira and we can start just working on them as they come? And then that slowly usually progresses to, hey, Patrick, I don't want Ben to be auditing my work every time I push new functionality each week. Can I start taking some ownership and scanning my website after we build out new things so that I can ensure and report upward? And I do see that progression kind of take place. For some teams, it just stays with privacy the whole time. Other times it's a mixed match. Sometimes ownership moves over to the owners of the website with oversight from privacy. So it's kind of ever a mixed match depending on what point in the process you're at.
thank you. Yeah, there was a follow-up to the cross-border uh, data flagging that we're doing. So yeah, I think if you go back, if you click into a third party, you can see which data elements are being shared with that third party. And then there's also the code evidence to see
There's
each
additional flags.
instance of,
So yeah,
yes.
you want to know the exact one. We're seeing it's coming from the France region. It's going to the United States. So we put the little flag here next to the code review if you want the additional detail there. But again, anything that's doing violations, we would have the call out under our tests.
Thank you. There were a couple of questions about the compatibility, for this tool. So it doesn't require any implementation. It's simply identifying the URL that you want to scan. The only configuration that would be needed is if you're trying to scan past the login page, which we can do
Yeah,
on
we
a
support
test
that for you
basis.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, there's no implementation. It's I create your account. As long as we're able to use cloud. We do have on-premise, but no teams really use on-premise for website scanning. That's more for code scanning where you have your IP involved. Teams are a little bit more protective there. For this, all of our teams are on the cloud version, and it's as simple as just plug and chug. So whatever website you're curious about and you want to simulate the region, you run the scan. Depending on how much stuff's on the website, it usually takes a few minutes and then it's complete. And then you can just review the results, set your scan cadence to whatever scan cadence you're hoping to get updates on. And then you'll be able to just have that run automatically and be able to check in when there's anything of concern for you.
Thank you. There was a question about pricing, about different how websites count for the number of scans. So yeah, that can be a somewhat nuanced conversation. We can discuss that more on a case by case basis, with our sales team. But yeah, it's it's not that complicated, but it's more of a case by case discussion, I would say.
And if you are curious on pricing, definitely reach out to that free scan. That's where that conversation will start. So you'll get a nice little free scan going where you can see some insight from your website. And then you can also let us know if you don't want the scan, but just want to talk pricing as well. But that'll trigger our team to be able to have those conversations with you. And then hopefully you'll come on board and you'll get to work with me.
Yeah, another question around PII auditing. So yeah, I think we touched a little bit on that already, looking at the different data elements that are identified in a scan, right, Patrick?
Yep, that's exactly it. So it's based on the data elements that are identified in the scan. Not every violation call might be collecting a data element, but we're still collecting various information on the user. So yeah, this correlates to any of those cookies that are actually grabbing a specific data element.
And you can click into each one, right, and see more specifics.
Yeah, so it'll show you the flows of what's going on. So this is user consent data. You could see that we are getting that from this variable, and these are the respective vendors that are collecting it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we're getting a lot of good questions. So yeah, appreciate all the engagements during the webinar today. Let's see, anything else to add? Oh, so yeah, we had a question about how many pages are scanned at
Yeah.
once.
So we scan by default the main website. It's a good starting place. As you can see, we scanned one website with 59 issues. Once teams get through that, we can crawl websites as well. And again, that would be a conversation between the sales team and your organization to make that contract organization or outline. But base level, it's the website domain that you're targeted. We scan that and simulate the user on that page and are not crawling. We do have the ability to crawl, and that would just be at additional contracting.
Thank you. All right, another one. So how long do you retain the assessment or scan information, and can you edit that?
So we retain it until you delete it. So in here, you delete, or if you end your partnership with us, we will delete that within the terms of our MSA agreement. which is usually within like a month or so. We keep it open just in case you want to like extract anything. If you tell us close it down, we'll close it down that second. So that's a good question. And then the scan cadence is also super helpful so that you'll just get the scans going over time.
Okay.
They're great questions.
Um, let's see. Yeah, we've just got a few minutes left. So if you have any more questions, we're happy to answer them now, or we can answer them after today's call. Like we mentioned, if you'd like to have your website scanned, we put that in the chat. I can put that in there one more time. But we'll have this information in the follow-up email from today with the recording, with the slides, with the recording from our previous sessions in this series about legal developments, as well as building a web privacy governance program.
Thank you all again for being so engaged. Definitely makes it more interactive and fun. And we can actually dig into things that you guys are curious about.
Awesome. Yeah. So if there's no more questions, we can wrap up. Yeah. Thanks for everyone for attending today. Yeah, we're happy to keep doing these types of sessions, and as we work with more customers and figure out better ways to identify these risks and get them remediated. Yeah, that the product is continually being updated based on feedback we get. So thanks again, and yeah, wrap up. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Bye.